ask you a question? Do you use Google Forms? And if you do, how do you use it? Do you use it for just assessments? Are you aware that Google Forms is for far more than assessments? That's right. I'm glad that you've joined this session because this session is all about the number of ways that Google Forms is for far more than just assessments. Hi, my name's Sarah Kiefer, and I'm here as part of the Shake Up Learning team. And I'm hoping to show you at least 2 different ways that maybe you've never envisioned using Google Forms. Join me. This is going to be exciting. I promise. Let's just take one quick second. Let's make sure that we're all understanding that the same tool that we're all talking about here, Google Forms, in its most basic sense, was created for survey purposes, a simple collection of data. What's your name? Do you like this? Yes and no answers. Not really a whole lot of extra. Now, you and I both know that teachers are highly creative people, and we tend to take what we're given, and a lot of times we flip them, or we crumple them all up and open them back up, and we use them for something completely different. That is what I have seen for so long with Google Forms, yet not everyone sees that. I think it's just they've not been exposed or they've not had the opportunity. So I'm going to show you in this session 5 different ways that you can use Google Forms. We're not going to cover your basic create a multiple choice quiz or create a checkbox quiz. We're not going to cover those specifically. I want to show you how you can do more. Go further with forms. Do more than just assessments. I have used Google Forms. It truly is one of my first Google loves. If you want to go back in time a little bit, because I had 6 classes of students and I really wanted to have their results a little bit faster. I had heard about this different kind of survey tool that teachers were using, and I went and I talked to a lady who knew a little bit more about it. And she shared Google Forms with me. She showed me how I could take my Scantron that I had been using and make it into a Google form. And once she showed me that, the wheels started turning in my head. And that's exactly what I think teachers do all the time, whether they realize it or not. We are creative people. So let's go ahead and jump in. Whenever I talk about a tool, I try to do really 2 things. One is I do choose my outfits based on the tool that I'm using. So forms are purple, so I wear purple. And then I also try to build my presentation or the resource that I'm sharing. I try to build it with the tool that I'm talking about. Forms was one that I struggled with a little bit, but what I came up with, I absolutely adore, and I've shared it with several people and they absolutely adore it. I hope you do as well. So I created the resource for this session all in, you guessed it, a Google form, which is one way that I want you to kind of flip your thinking with Google Forms, because we're going to jump into the form. Now, just as a heads up, I'm going to share the form with you as the resource, but I'm also going to be jumping into the back side of it, the editing side of it, for different purposes. You're not going to be able to jump into the back side of this particular form, but please know that what I do with this form, you're going to be able to do with forms that you create or that you have access to editing. So make sure that you take what we do in this session and apply it to all of your other forms. I promise you, once you start digging around and kind of opening the doorways to a lot of these different ideas and thoughts, I promise you're going to just start thinking of all of these different ways. And one more thing that I want to remind you of, if you have a great idea or there's something that I kind of consider them pain points, if there's something that you really feel that a Google form or any of the other Google applications should have or that you'd really like to see, look for the question mark. Give Google that feedback because they do listen. They want to hear from us teachers. They want us to give them their feedback and they listen. Now, it could be a little bit of time, but they do listen and things will change. And the more feedback they get and the more for the same idea that they get, they might listen a little bit faster. So here we go. Let's jump into the form that I created. I've got a little screenshot of it over here. And voila, here we go. Here's a Google form. I created it just for this session. It's for far more than just assessments, but you can see it has the same idea, feeling behind it. It's a multiple choice question. And like I said in the intro, 5 things that we're going to cover. Now you might say, Sarah, you have more than 5 multiple choice options. And I would say, yes, that's right. But I always build in resources at the end, ways to contact me. So that's what I chose to add into here. And you'll see why I've chosen to put it here as opposed to at the very end of the form. And guys, I'm going to tell you one more thing. This is not a form that I have any intention of anyone ever completing and filling out and hitting that submit button. That's another thing to think about. The purpose of this form is not to get submissions back. I'm not looking for that. If you do hit submit, no harm. I'll get it. It's fine. But I'm truly not looking for that submit. So keep that in mind too as we go through. And if you've never seen this before, I'm going to be able to jump back and forth between the editing simply by clicking on this little pencil down here in the bottom right-hand corner. When you see that pencil, that means that you are a collaborator, and that means you can jump into the editing side and you can make changes to it. And you see the little, on this one, it's a little exclamation point. There you go. Let's report a problem to Google. Give them some feedback. That's where you can do that at. Are you ready? So let's read this question, even though it's not a question. We're going to cover 5 things to help you go further. Key settings, branching style questions, data validation, copy, paste, and reuse, the template gallery. And then, as I said, ways to connect with me and then learn more about forms. I'm a giver. I really do love sharing, and I love supporting teachers and their students in making technology work a little better in their classrooms. And you can see behind me, I do try to blog and share out at techyoucando.com. Feel free to catch me over there. Let's jump into the first one. Key settings for you to know. Now, choose that as your answer, click next, and we're in business. I heavily used the text feature in Google Forms for this. As you can see, there aren't questions on this page until you get down to the bottom. And you're going to see that question at the bottom over and over again. This allows you, who's going to use this resource, to go through this in your own time later on. You can be moving at your own pace. You can if you remember those books, Choose Your Own Adventures, you can create your own Forms is More Than Assessments adventure using this resource. You don't have to go through it the same way as if your partner teacher is also watching this. You guys don't have to go through it in the same way. You will have the same resources. Go through it in the way that makes the most sense for you. Try to do that for our students too, don't we? Kind of that differentiation piece. If you're already comfortable with the settings, skip it. Move on to the next thing. But let's take a few minutes and really explore the settings. I love how Google has kind of created this universal look to their icons. So if you're in one application and you find the settings gear wheel and you go to another application, you know that that's what you need to look for. Now, I will say with Forms, there is an update that is supposed to be coming and hopefully soon. Is they're going to take the settings and they're going to create it in a new tab. So you have your questions tab, you have your responses tab, and then supposedly there's going to be that settings tab. I can't wait for that. That'll be awesome. So let's really look at this. Currently, there's 3 tabs when you click on your settings gear wheel that we need to pay attention to. There's the general tab, there's the presentation tab, and then there's the quizzes tab. And it's at this point that I am going to open up the back side of this form so we can kind of dig into this a little bit more. And I know you might be saying, but Sarah, wait a minute. This is all kind of basic stuff. True. But if you're not aware of the basics, you're not going to be able to do more than the basics. So we're just going to kind of get everybody on the same page. We're going to level that playing field, and we're going to make sure that we're all talking the same language. So we're going to leave that site. Here we go. So right now we have questions and responses, and then soon it's supposed to be settings right here. Let's jump to the gear wheel in the top right-hand corner. And here's our 3 tabs. They're very basic, simple, read them. They're explanatory. And if you see the little question mark hovering over it, let's hover over that. Or clicking on it is going to give you some extra information. Wonderful. Be more like your kids, be more like your students. Don't be afraid to click. Chances are you're not going to hurt anything that you're working with. So up here, collecting emails, this requiring the sign-in, this is one that gets people all the time, even myself. If you forget to check it, uncheck it, depending on what your purpose is, it could really go a long way to prevent people from doing the things they need to with a form, or allowing too many people to be able to fill in your form. And then at the end, here you go. What can respondents do after they submit it? Can they come back and edit? And can they see the summary of charts and text responses? Up to you. The next tab is your presentation tab. And again, up to you. You have to think of what the purpose of your form is. Do you want to see the progress bar? Do you want to shuffle your questions? For this resource that I created, shuffling the questions probably wouldn't make any sense. And then do you want to show a link to another submission? Again, for my purposes, that's not going to make any sense. That's why none of those are checked. And this bottom one, the confirmation message, this is something that if you've never done it, I highly suggest that you do because it is fantastic. I love using this with students because it can give them the next set of directions. It's not something you have to have written on the board. You don't have to tell them before they're filling out this form, or if you're sending something to parents, you don't have to depend on them remembering what it was that you told them to do after. Tuck it right here, and once they hit that submit button, they're going to see that confirmation message, and it makes a world of difference. You can even add in a link. I did. Now, it doesn't look like a hyperlink at the moment. It will once they get into the form, they hit the submit, and they get this confirmation message. It will be a hyperlink, I promise. I just love that aspect of it when I found it, because my students would take the quiz, and then they'd be like, Mrs. Kiefer, what is it that I do? And I'd be like, well, I told you, or remember I wrote it on the board, or just having that, again, one more time, right there for them, made it real simple. It's also a great way for you to break up your forms if you needed to into separate, because you can link the second one or the third right here in your confirmation message. The third tab we're going to cover here is the quizzes tab. Now, this is if you wanted to take this form and create it as a quiz to where you could grade things, or you could get some sort of like data collection as far as like how many students answered question 1 correctly versus question 10, all that kind of stuff. And you can see I'm not turning that on because, again, my form, that's not its purpose. But you can see all of these. Simple and straightforward. You can see some of these question marks are grayed out. Hover over them, they tell you what they are, because I don't have this turned on as a quiz. Easy enough. This is fantastic for when you're ready to create a quiz. But remember, this is all about more than assessments, more than. All right, so we're going to cancel out of this menu, and let's open this back up by using my eyeball. I love the eyeball. People always ask, Sarah, how do you share it? Go to your eyeball. This is the link that you need to share with them. Yes, there are other ways of getting it, but I do this way. I choose this way because it reminds me that I also need to go through this form, check for spelling errors, grammar errors, all that kind of stuff. All right, let's get back into the key settings. Now, customization, such a fun part of forms. Again, pretty basic, but if you're not aware of it, I want to make sure that you are. Because when you create something more than an assessment, having a branding, having a color, having something that grabs people's eye, like the top of my form. Do you like that? Got the Shake Up Learning Back to School Conference logo in there. Got the title of this session, and I have my name. I created that as a Google drawing, downloaded it as a PNG file. You could also use a JPEG, and then customize this particular form. And when you do that, it's really awesome because I'm not a graphic artist. Art is not necessarily my strong suit, but Google's helping me out because I click on the palette wheel. And because of the image that I've uploaded, it gives me a selection of better colors to choose from. It's really nice. It's really helpful, and it takes a little bit of that stress off of me trying to come up with a good color combo. So I selected the blue to be the darker, and then I also selected the background. Now, here's another heads up. We're supposed to be getting more fonts than this. I don't have it yet. I hope it comes soon. But I'm also not too worried because I have accepted that having fewer choices just means that I get into the work of getting what I need done. Instead of sitting there and scrolling through hundreds of fonts, I would do that. I would. I have these 4 to pick from, and most of the time I leave it at basic. I want people to be able to read it and read it easily. So that's a little bit about customization. And when you read through here, you can see it's just real short, text heavy. This is a resource for you. This is not an assessment. So what are we going to do now? Well, hopefully you're going to stick with me and we're going to go back and learn something new. So we come back. It's remembering that I had this particular answer already selected on the beginning of my form. So now I'm ready. Let's jump into branching style questions. Do you know what that is? If not, definitely make sure you get out your notepad and start taking down some notes, or open a new window and jot down some notes, because branching style questions are a game changer for any Google form that you use. It'll save the respondent time. It'll save you a lot of headache, and it's super awesome. I promise you. Do you remember that choose your own adventure analogy that I made? You get that by using these branching style questions. It's wonderful. I even have an awesome example for us. So we're going to go next and see how it takes us to a different screen. We're not in the settings screen. We're not just going in order through here. I want to go to the branching style questions. Here we are. So again, think about those books. And if you're about my age-ish, you probably remember those books that I would devour them when I was a kid. You read through a page, there's a question at the end, and based on the answer that you've chosen, you're going to go to that page or you're going to go to that page. And when you get to that page, the story takes that twist. And then you have another question, another decision to make, and then you have to go on and you go to a different page based on that answer. But if you come back and you read that same story and you chose the other path, the story changes somehow. And then it gives you a different decision. And then you have different options to go through. You could read the same book so many different times and the story's going to end differently. You can do that with a Google form. It's pretty awesome. Now, it's a little complicated if you don't think through this first. So here we go. Branching style questions. First of all, I've tucked in a resource here from Casey, so you can always refer to that. It's a great resource. But what I've also done is I went ahead and I tucked in a form, and this is an activity that I did with my 8th graders. I taught 7th and 8th grade social studies. And when I inherited the 8th grade teachers' boxes of hand-me-down materials and supplementals and all that kind of stuff, there was a really cool activity. And for a couple years, I did it on paper and it worked. And then I started getting into Google Forms and technology, and we had Chromebooks. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could do this. I'd gotten a little savvy with Google Forms, so I wasn't afraid to play around. And quite honestly, I was tired of having the line of students waiting for me to give them that next answer. I wanted them to be able to move through this and make these decisions and maybe not overhear each other. So this is a different Google form, and you can click through this. You can actually play this activity, if you will. This is an activity that we did as part of 8th grade social studies, all about the pilgrims coming over, but it's a great decision-making activity. The students are put into groups. They have to make these decisions together, and then based on their answer, something happens. Are you ready? Here we go. So I build out the scenario here. No questions, no anything for them to respond to. They go to next. Now, they did have a paper where it talks about the colonist tally sheet. They did have it on paper. I did feel that it was important for the kids to be able to sit down and work out their math, but also because I knew there was a good chance that we probably wouldn't get through this in one class period. I had 42 minutes. So I was conscious of that. So they had a piece of paper they could write all this stuff out. So you go to next, and then you have to type in answers. So Sarah, let's just do a group of 3. And that's just so I knew who had been doing the activity. Here's round 1. So again, they have this scenario. It comes down to at the end, they have to subtract 25 lives. It was fate. Pilgrims died. It happened. Okay, so they had to do the math. Again, still, it's not an assessment. Here we go. They come to their first decision. I set up the decision, and then they have to pick. And to think about this, this is like an A or a B. That's what it was on my paper. I just left off the A and the B as the option. So if they choose A, talk about it in their group, they choose A, it's going to send them to one part of the form. If they choose B, it's going to send them to a different part of the form. And yes, what happens to the pilgrims, depending on their answer, is a different thing. Now, you might be going, Sarah, how do you make this happen? I'm going to show you. Remember my pencil in the bottom right-hand corner? I'm going to edit this form. And here we go. Here's the backside of this one. Very simple. Here was that intro. I'm asking for student names. Here's that first scenario. And then we get down to the first decision. And you might say, well, Sarah, these just look like multiple choice questions. And I would say, you know what? You're right. But the magic sauce in this, what really makes this a choose your own adventure, is when you click on this answer option and you see this additional piece here. That's not the initial what's included with the multiple choice. To get there, you go to your World's Skinniest Snowman, click on it, and make sure you have the go-to section based on answer checkmarked, turned on, selected, pick your word. And when you do that, you're going to have these two open. Now, when I created this form, I had all of my papers with me because I was converting this paper activity into a Google form. And I did this one at a time. So when I click on one of these drop downs, you're going to see a giant list. I didn't have those at first. Okay. And I was very specific with my naming. So when you see this decision 1, answer A, because this is decision 1, and this is option A, and this is option B. I needed to keep it simple for my brain to be able to make this form work correctly. You could sit down and sketch this all out and give them different kinds of names if you're worried about the namings of your sections, giving it away. This is how it worked for me. Don't be afraid to kind of modify this to make it work for you. So I wrote out this decision, and before you can go to these sections, you have to have the sections. So you can see that the very next section is decision 1, answer A, typed in the results. And then I went to decision 1, answer B, typed in those results. So then very easily I could come back up, select where they were going. And again, remember, I didn't have that lower part. I didn't have all of this stuff just yet. Okay, so this is because I've already built this out, and you can see how it might get a little confusing if you don't have good, solid naming conventions that you're aware of. Keep that in mind. All right, so as you scroll down, and then what do I do immediately? I remind the kids to record their results and then include decision 2. Set up the scenario, give them their options. This one had 3. And if I were to click on this particular question, you can see again, decision 2, answer A, B, and C. Not that I had to have A, B, and C here. Continue building the form straight down. It's a very repetitive process, but I promise if you go slowly, you take your time, and you have this worked out somehow. This activity was already worked out for me. When you create yours, one item at a time. Make sure you remember that. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't overwhelm the process, because I guarantee you, if you do, you probably will not finish this out. This is branching style. This is exactly how I created my resource for today. I've got my big question, and then I built out each of the sections one at a time. Key settings, branching style, and continuing on, data validation. Now, it's also important to remember that when you do these, at the very bottom of your question, so this is decision 2, what you have to make sure that you what you're telling it to do is either go to the next section or go specifically somewhere else. And this can also be where you get a little confused, but you can easily stop your creation process, open up the form just by using your little eyeball, and do a little double check. So I'm really kind of curious. If we go here, and we see the results, record your results for 1, go to decision 2. I'm really kind of shocked to see that this one says record your results for section 2. I don't think we really want that, but the only way I'll know is if I go and I test it out. And this is an important thing for a teacher, because you know your students are going to call you out on it. Or your process, your project, your activity is not going to work the way that you had intended. Use that eyeball. Yes, you'll have to fill in a little bit of data here, and that's okay. We're not actually going to submit this. So let's just pick some answers, keep going. Took me to what I was looking for. That's awesome. Doing a double check every once in a while before you get all the way to the end can really save you a lot of time. Branching style questions are wonderful. You could do digital breakouts this way. You could do choose your own adventure styles. You could use this for intervention or acceleration with your students based on the answer that they pick. Maybe you loop them back to a resource video or some sort of reference guide. And if they're doing really well, you could push them on to a more challenging question or a different kind of question based on how they answered that one question, moving them through the form. I really do love this activity, and I really do think that branching style questions are a must understand for teachers, professional development leaders. Think how cool that would be is if you gave your teachers or the audience members a Google form and allow them to work through at their own pace. It's a lot of fun. All right, let's go back and let's learn something else. Again, branching style questions. We've covered key settings, branching style questions. How about data validation? This one's really cool for passwords, or if you're going to do some of those digital breakout codes, Google Forms is perfect for this. And again, you're not going to have that long line of students coming up and asking if you can check what they wrote down on their piece of paper. Google Forms can help speed up that process and allow them to be a little bit more independent with it. Also then allowing you to have time to go around and support the students that need the support, or to help a group work out maybe a disagreement. So data validation works really well, but I want to show you this with the very clear understanding nothing is perfect. If you're really truly looking to lock down an assessment and do something super heavy, it has a lot of security around it, Google Forms probably is not your friend. It's not the tool that you need to choose. Make sure you're using the tool that works for the activity that you are looking to do. Otherwise, your activity might not go as well. Protecting a Google form is something that I think when I hear teachers talk about it, they're just simply wanting the kids to have to wait. You post it in your classroom or you post it in your LMS, and you don't want students to run into your classroom and sit down and be able to just jump into it and get going. You want them to stop and take a breather and make sure that you give them any necessary instructions before they start. Not so much to prevent them from actually doing something, but let's get everybody on the same page. I'll give you the password, and now it's available to go. I'll show you another way that works probably even better, but is an alternative if you're kind of not sure about how to do this password thing and you're just not real interested in learning that. But I do want to show it to you because if you're interested in creating breakout sessions, this is great. Those little digital breakouts where they have to get that code right. It's really cool. So what I'm going to do is I've got this, you guessed it, other Google form that we're going to password protect. I want to create a section. These are the two things that we're going to have to do in order to create a password protection. Got to create a section for the form and then use data validation to actually create that password. And notice my little note at the bottom. Always, 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 always double check this, because it's kind of frustrating as a teacher when you give them a password that you created and they try it and it doesn't work, and then you have hands in the air. So do yourself a favor before you actually go ahead and share this out with your students. Please make sure that you've double checked it to make sure that you really do know what it is that password is you're sharing. Okay, so you're right. I have to go into the editing side of this. Now, first thing it says is we have to create a section for this. So I've got the actual form here, and I don't want students to jump into that right away. I need them to hold on. Let me give them the instructions, then I'll give them the password, and then they're off to the races. So what I have to do is I have to create a new section, and I'm going to just title this password. Now you can't do the data validation in the section title. You have to actually add a question. It's not really a question, but you have to add it so that it does the work of getting that password. All right, so you could just say enter the here. Okay, so you do want it to be a short answer text. It automatically change that for me. But if not, click on your drop down, make sure you select short answer, and then find that world's skinniest snowman and select response validation. So they have to get this response correct before they can move on. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And while we're down here, probably a great idea to go ahead and require this question, even if you don't require any of the other ones. Make sure you require this one, otherwise data validation kind of means nothing. So here we go. So we are going to look at our options. You could have it be a number, you could have it be text, you have a certain length, you could have a regular expression. So jump into these. We're not going to spend a lot of time on really going back and forth with what each of these things are. I just want you to be aware that you do have some options. So I'm going to leave it as a number, but then the second option, and these will change, this menu changes based on the option that you have selected here. So you could say that it is a particular number. You could have it be any of these options. For password purposes, I want it to be a specific number. All right. So here we're going to say the custom text error, try again. So if they have the wrong password, this is going to prompt them and say, try again. Now, what it's going to do here is only have a number, any number. As long as they type a number, it'll allow them to go through. That's pretty easy. Might be great for the lower grades. All right, guys, just type in a number. I wouldn't use that over and over again. They'll figure out that that's the way you're creating your passwords. Not super secure, but it is a great way to create a very simple and kind of infallible type password. Now, if you want something that's a little bit more secure, shall we say, let's go with either text or, let's do a text. So you want it to contain, not contain, make it an email or a URL address. Let's do contain. So we wanted to, and see how now you've got this other section to where you can type in the password. So you're telling the form, this is the password that I want. So it has to contain this, and you could give it ABC123. Make your password. Again, think of your students, make it appropriate for them, and then your custom error is try again, or check your spelling, or slow down, whatever you feel is important. I've got it required. If you have your form set up as an answer key, I would not ask for this to have any kind of point value to it, and let's test it out. So here we go, let's go next. And if I just were to try to hit next, number one, because I've required it, it's not going to let me. But if I just type in something, see how it says, try again? I can type in, nope. Not going to let me move forward. Think of it as you have to get this question correct. So let's try one more time. And see how the red went away? Indicates to your students that, hey, they got the password. And now we're ready to move into it. Works out pretty nice. Now let's pause for a second and let's talk about, there is concern from teachers that students are able to use the inspect. Like if you right click on your screen and you get this, or two finger tap on your mouse, whatever you're using, and you use this inspect option, it's going to pull up a bunch of what looks like gobbledygook on the right-hand side. There is the ability for students to be able to go through there if they understand how to read all of this code in this and be able to decipher what your password is. Now, again, like I said, don't put a password on a form. If this is a high security event, you probably need to use some other tool for that. But for your everyday run-of-the-mill, I just don't want students jumping into this form right away. Using this data validation works really nice. Again, probably would be a better tool to use if you're doing one of those digital breakouts and you just want to be able to have the students double checking their answer options without having to run up to you and ask, did I get this question correct? Did I get this answer right? That's a great use of the data validation. All right, we can leave this form, and we can also leave the Plymouth Rock. Let's get rid of that. And we're back to our resource. Let's go back and learn something new. We're trucking on. Hopefully, a couple of these things already have kind of opened your eyes to a different way of using Google Forms than you've typically already done. This next one, copy, paste, and reuse, is really more about the backside of a Google form and the ability for you to more efficiently make Google Forms when you're creating them. Because often what I'm finding is when teachers are wanting to create Google Forms is they already have what it is that they want on a Google Doc or somewhere, and they just want to be able to copy and paste it over. And a lot of times that feels very redundant, very tedious, but Google Forms is great for that. And in fact, it'll save you a ton of time if you're the person that is new into this and you're jumping from paper style assessments. Yes, this one is really good for those that are using forms as assessments, but the backside of this will really help you be a lot more efficient with your time. So what I've got here is I have a quiz that I actually always used for my, again, 8th graders. And you can see it, this would have printed out on paper and the kids would have marked their answers and then turned it back in, and then I'd have to hand grade it. Or if you stepped up and you used the Scantron machine, they filled in their little bubbles and then I'd have to run it through the machine, hope that it didn't jam, hope that I had my answers marked correctly and all that. But using Google Forms can really go a long way in making that process a little bit more efficient. Plus, it gives me back a lot of really great statistics. So I'm just going to start a new form just from scratch. Best way to do that is forms.new. Great little shortcut here. Brand new form. Keep in mind though, it doesn't organize itself in your drive. You still have to come back and do that. Just a heads up. So give it a name, chapter 6 quiz. I did not intend for that to be all capitalized. Add in a description if you would like. I always come over here now and click. It changes the name for me the first time. And then here we go. We're ready to create the quiz, right? So here's where copy and paste works nicely. What I typically do is I separate my tabs and I do a half and half situation. I usually have the form on that side and I have the document on the left. And what I even do, I cheat a little bit and I scroll it over. So then this way I can easily go back and forth between the two. Depending on your machine, there are some shortcuts that allow you to do that. There's some extensions that allow you to quickly do this. I'm kind of an old school person on this one. I just separate the tabs and shrink my tabs to be half size. So here I go. I just want to copy this question. Paste, done. And then here's where, you're going to love this if you're not aware of it, especially if you take your class roster and you want your students to all be named in a question so they can just select their name. Copying and pasting, whether you have these 4 answer options or you have a list of 25, 50, 100 kids, whatever your class size looks like, or maybe it's your entire grade level. I'm going to copy all of these and I'm going to simply click in option 1 and paste. Boom. All of them straight down, separates them out. The only thing I have to do is come back and do a little bit of cleanup. That is a whole lot faster. And quite honestly, yes, I could probably type all of these gentlemen's names very quickly, but copy and paste, boom, simple, done. I could come over here. I'm ready for my next question. Copy. And here's what you might do too. You could just duplicate here. I'm going to add in a new question, paste, ready. Again, a little bit of cleanup, much better than retyping in their names. And you're off. And then you can do some of these really awesome features of shuffling the option order. I absolutely adore that they came out with this, because not only can you shuffle all of the questions so that you don't have 2 students sitting next to each other that are taking the exact same quiz in the exact same order with the answers in the exact same order, you can now have all of your students taking the same quiz with the same questions and same answers, but the questions might be in different orders. The answer options might be in different orders, or they might not, but your kids won't know that. So everybody's quiz is unique. So awesome. Always want to make sure that I point that out as well. Now, what we're going to do, copy and paste, that's fantastic. Let's make this a little bit bigger so that you can see. Another thing that you can do now, and this is a great, especially for those teachers, it's a great tool to have in your tool belt because we tend to use the same questions over and over, like last name, first name, class period, homeroom teacher. Take your pick as to what it is that you're repeating your questions, because you can import them. And it looks like a little piece of paper with an arrow on it. When you click on it, that little piece of paper, it's going to pull up any and all of your forms, previously selected forms. Right now, let's go with our password protected. I know that has a last name, first name question in it. And what it's going to do is it pops out a new column on your current form, and you could select all of these. You could select certain ones of them. I'm actually going to select last name and first name. I definitely want those two questions, and I want to pull them over. I like how I had them set up on that other form, and I say import, and boom. Other than having to drag them to the top, which makes a whole lot more sense, you might want to do that first. But now as you create more and more forms, if you have some of those standard questions, you could easily pull them from one form to another. Or if you're making some of the same similar kinds of forms and you only want a couple of these questions, you can do that too. That importing the questions feature is fantastic. Make sure that you understand that and make sure that you use that. And the other thing that I have seen teachers do, just as a little side tip, is if they know that they're going to have the same kind of identifying questions, last name, first name, class period, or homeroom teacher, those kinds of questions, you may want to create a form that's very generic in every other aspect with those questions already in there. And then when you need to make your next form, you just come open up this generic form that has it set up exactly how you want it. Maybe it's even got the same theme colors that you always want selected. I don't know. You could go crazy on this, or you could just keep it super simple, because every new form is going to be purple, just like my fashion sense here. Click on your snowman. You can just easily make a copy, and then you have that next copy each time with all of that stuff already pre-done. So you spend a couple minutes at one sitting, create all of it, and then in the future, boom, you've got those couple of questions already pre-ready for you. Okay, let's expand our window back out. Let's go back to our resource. What is our next item? So let's go back and learn something new. Getting close to the end. The final thing that I want to show you, as far as going further, learning more, having a better understanding of all of the possibilities with Google Forms, this is a biggie. And it is in Forms, it's in Sheets, it's in Docs, and it's in Slides. So be sure and do yourself a favor. This might even be a bookmark thing. Be sure that you look at the template gallery. This is Google's way of being able to share out pre-created, ready to use, or ready to modify Google Forms. And they have a whole section. And if you're in your school domain, chances are they probably have a domain-specific gallery where the teachers in your district can be putting template forms into this gallery, and anyone can come in and use them and take them and make them their own. But I find that so few people actually know about it. So do yourself a favor, bookmark this, share this out, because this is sure to be a time saver. Here is the link. It's actually a web page. And you can also find this when you go into your Drive and you want to create a new, go down, got to go over to More, Forms, and go to Template Gallery. Same with Docs, Sheets, Slides. You may have wondered why they have those pop out, I call them shark teeth, and it says a blank one or template gallery. Make sure you check out those template galleries. It's a time saver, and it's really awesome because they're pre-built. Look at what you have in this template gallery, already created on all of these Google Forms. All you have to do is click on it, and it's yours. Easy peasy. So you want a work request, time off request, job application, order form, customer feedback, event feedback. Scroll down. Here's some personal. I'm going to find a time to meet with someone, party invite, t-shirt sign up, event registration. Keep going. Here's some specific for education, exit tickets, assessments, worksheets, course evaluations, pre-created, ready for you to take. Make your own copy. As soon as you click on it, it's yours. Customize it to whatever you want. Notice they even have various themes already chosen for you. This template gallery is wonderful. Now you notice I have a second little tab up here, and that is for your domain. If that shows up, that means that in your domain, you also might have some maybe customized forms ready to go, or maybe they're forms that a group of teachers, a grade level of teachers, a content section of teachers, that they're sharing these forms out, and it's fantastic. Use them. That's what they're there for. All right, so I hope that through those 5 different options, let's go back. Let's go through those again real quick. So you have key settings, branching style, data validation, copy, paste, and reuse, and then the template gallery. Those 5, I hope that at least 2 of those kind of open your eyes and go, wow, Google Forms is far more than assessments. I hope you get that it is just so much more. And I know it's for more than assessments, but it's also far more than assessments, right? The last 2 on there, I'm going to go through kind of quickly. They're there for you on the resource. You can always connect with me, but if you're interested in learning more specifically about forms, please do click on this last option, choose the next button. And guys, I've done several webinars all specifically about forms that you are also welcome to learn more about forms. I have a Wakelet, which is a wonderful collection tool that I just continually add to as I come across neat little tips and tricks for forms and for a lot of other things. I've done a couple of webinars, as I said. You can scroll down, you can see all of these. Click on these, they're videos. I also have other resources. And then let's go back and jump to the last section. I'm going to wrap up with, I hope you enjoyed this session about forms being for more than assessments. And I want to connect with you. I want to continue sharing and learning with you and from you. So let's make this a two-way conversation. If you would like to connect with me, I've got several different ways that you can connect with me. And also, if you like what you're seeing in these sessions and you want to connect and work more with Casey, with myself, or with any of the other Shake Up Learning trainers, please do click on this link, check it out, connect with us. We'll be sure to get back with you. Now, like I said, we're finished. So is the form. When you get to this point, honest and truly, you don't have to click that submit button. I don't need you to click that submit button. If you'd like to, go for it. But I hope that this session has provided you with at least 2 ways, hopefully a lot more ways that forms is more than assessments. Thanks for joining me.